the human condition is fundamentally a fight against entropy. And like our ability to win is arming us with the ability to manipulate energy. And the more we manipulate and manage energy, the better we'll be. And, still a couple billion on the planet that don't have access to energy. The market is so big, like there is room for multiple $100 billion companies. Like it's so big, and there's so many applications, and like we can't be all things to all people. It's a 20 megawatt unit. We can do as many as you want, but if you need like a gigawatt that turns on immediately, like, yeah, we can't, like, I'm not going to do that. It's not a good fit for me. Or if you need like 1 megawatt, like there's guys out there solving that. I can't, that's too hard for me. And that's okay. Again, it's just such a big space.
Yeah.
That there's so much room for lots of different participants and business models. And I fundamentally believe competition makes everyone better, right?
Just because the facts are A, if the narrative is B and everyone believes the narrative, then B is what matters. But it's our job in our industry to speak up proudly, soberly, and to engage people in this dialogue. Those 2.5 billion people that are in energy poverty, they need us.
America cannot meet this threat alone.
If there is a single country,
of course, the world cannot meet it without America.
That is willing to
We're going to need you, the next generation, to finish the
overhaul
job.
nuclear regulation.
We need scientists to design new fuels.
Focus on net public
We
benefit
need engineers to invent new technologies. We
over absurd levels of radiation
need
protection.
entrepreneurs to sell those technologies.
Then we will march towards this.
We need workers to operate assembly lines that hum with high-tech,
We
zero-carbon
have
components.
unlimited prosperity for all humans.
We need diplomats and businessmen and women and Peace Corps volunteers to help developing nations skip past the dirty phase of development and transition to sustainable sources of energy. In other words, we need you.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the Fire to Fission podcast, where we talk about energy-dense fuels and how they can better human lives. Today, I'm joined by my friend, Michael Crabb, SVP Commercial at Last Energy. Michael, how you doing today?
It's great to be here. Really excited to finally do this with you.
Yeah. I'm really excited for this conversation. A little concerned that it'll feel like a little bit of inside baseball. You know, we've known each other for a while, and I feel like we might self-identify as nuclear bros. So apologies ahead of time for any members of the audience that have to put up with that. But I'm stoked to dive into your background, talk about Last Energy. I think it needs to be said up front. What you guys are doing is really, really awesome, super impressive. So yeah, we'll dive in. Before we get to Last, let's chat about your background. Where'd you get your start, Michael?
Yeah, great. So way back, I studied architectural engineering and realized towards the end of my degree that I didn't want to sit in AutoCAD all day. And so I needed to figure out something else to do. Yeah. Well, and so instead I traded into sitting in Excel and PowerPoint all day. I started in energy private equity. And the fund that I was in was part of a larger strategic company, a large independent power producer here in the US. And so they had deep background in gas power and natural gas midstream markets. But really, the mandate was to look at all energy generation. And this is back in 2011. And so to give you context, it's when the shale play started coming in, right? And as like wind and solar were kind of starting to come down the cost curve, the ITC, PTC was still uncertain future. And so it was just really and then interest rates, who can forget, for the last decade, right, have been coming down and down and down. And so it's been a really interesting decade to be in the commodity and energy space. More specifically, as I spent half a decade there as an investor, I did a little bit of domestic LNG, liquefied natural gas development work. So it's kind of small scale, high horsepower applications. Oil prices went from $100 to $30. It didn't make sense anymore. I rolled in back to the corporate IPP and led corporate M&A and strategy. And so started to kind of broaden the different types of business models that we were looking at investing, bought a gas-fired plant up in the Northeast, and joined the team here at Last Energy almost 3 years ago now.
Awesome. Yeah, hearing people that worked on the LNG projects, like I think people forget that LNG wasn't a thing. Like we were going to import these systems, right? And then suddenly we turned around and we're exporting gas and exporting LNG to countries all over the world. Like, and now it seems so commonplace, but it wasn't, right? And I don't know. I use this parallel a lot with nuclear.
Yeah. And well, in a lot of the same systems and processes, right? Like there are a lot of parallels. I think the interesting thing for me is I got to participate. I kind of got a front row seat on a couple of different technology maturation curves, and some that worked and some that didn't, right? So I was about halfway through on the solar side. Like there was still a lot of skepticism about solar and wind in 2011. Um, and then yeah, on the LNG side, right, in the 2015, right, still a lot of skepticism, right. The first conference I went to, there was 100 people, and by the time the third conference rolled around, there were 1,000, right.
Yeah.
And so now in the nuclear space, it's sort of a different maturation curve. It's sort of relearning, but I think that has its own burdens too, right. And we can talk about it more later. I think in some ways makes it harder, right? Is because you're starting with 1,000, and sometimes that's not always a good thing. So it's just the parallels and differences are really interesting.
Yeah. So how did you get connected? Well, I'll say with the group, right? Because it wasn't Last Energy when you joined; it was the Energy Impact Center, and you guys have kind of gone through this iteration of branding and strategy and developing your business, right?
Yeah, I would say the thesis was fairly far along by the time I joined. So there was, definitely work to do to really flesh that out and become more public. Uh, but but yeah, I joined when we were, effectively operating Last Energy in sort of a form of stealth mode and continuing to test the hypothesis that those at the Energy Impact Center had built based on the back of over 1,000 different conversations and the Open 100 and some of those other processes. I was looking for more of a, growth opportunity. I had looked at every generating technology, but for nuclear, in the, over a decade of my career at that point. And I got connected to Brett, our founder here, and to be totally honest, took the first call just to practice sort of getting into, interview shape again. Right. Because it's sort of there's a process, there's a mentality to pitching yourself and asking questions and answering questions. And I vividly remember spending the first hour, just grilling him with questions because obviously the reputation of the industry had been so poor from an execution standpoint. And, I'm as much a deal junkie as I am a nuclear bro, right? I wanted to be building things and financing things. So after that conversation and some of his answers, I said, okay, well, that was actually way more interesting than I thought it was, but he's going to pitch his own book. So I better start reading up. And so that took me, it's sort of a 3-month process, I think. Folks with my background from finance, energy, whatever, if you're really motivated, then you start going down the rabbit hole. You start clicking on the blue hyperlinks and articles, right? You start, you're ending up in, whatever database has all the different publications and studies that get referenced correctly or incorrectly, as it may be. And pretty soon you go, oh yeah, wait, what? It's just a steam power plant? Like, wait, what? Like it's rocks that sit in water? Like remember, right? From a gas power plant perspective, like what we can do is crazy. It's crazy. We're like pulling out like blended liquids from 6,000 feet below ground, embedded in rock, pressurizing it, sending it 2,000 miles to then light it on fire and spin a very finely honed gas turbine that ramps at a couple megawatts a minute.
And
right?
use the waste heat of that to make it even more efficient.
And make it more efficient and operate that thing freaking remotely. Right? I mean, we were operating gigawatt gas combined cycles with 24 people.
Yeah.
And, in Pennsylvania, getting gas from West Texas, right? Like that whole system is mind boggling. And when you compare it to, and there's a lot of detailed work in nuclear, don't get me wrong, when you compare it to loading fuel and letting it sit for 2 years and having a see, like that's pretty, like that's it.
Easy.
So that was like a real, and you don't believe it either, right? You're like, wait, why? But it's such a big thing. You hear all that, like it's so complicated, That was a real light bulb moment for me, and then been very hard at work building and fleshing out the detailed business case for Last Energy based on my experience as an investor, right? What do investors need to see at what stages of the project, and what pockets of capital are best positioned to take that risk and get exposure to those upside returns?
Yeah. Okay, so the progression was, right, the podcast, Titans and Nuclear, stepping into the Open 100 project, right? You guys have published work on that. That was where you kind of open sourced nuclear reactor design, and then leveraged that to say, like, can we build a product or generate a product that we can then go out and sell, but then innovate on several aspects of the business model, right?
Yeah.
Did I succinctly capture
Yeah,
like five,
I
six
think
years of
that's
work in about 20
yeah, I think so.
seconds?
Yeah, yeah, almost a decade down into 30 seconds. Yeah, I'd say that's right. I think the only we like to say nuclear power plant. A nuclear reactor is such a small portion of the plant,
Yeah.
and I think the industry really does itself a disservice, hyper focusing on the one thing that we do really, really, really well, and ignoring the rest of the stuff that, as an industry, we've done incredibly poorly. Um, and so, yeah, we really are careful to say nuclear power plant. That is our product. It was part of that Open 100 learning. It was part of our Titans of Nuclear learnings, right? When we talk to customers, they said, hey, we really love nuclear power, but we go to the market and someone sells us a reactor and then we have to build the power plant. And, you basically are starting from scratch as a utility. So
Yeah.
that'd be the only net.
How many people worked on that Open 100 project?
God, I don't know. It was technically before my time.
Yeah.
I was employee 21 maybe, but we had a number of there were some labs, there were some engineering firms, right? We had a host of service agreements, advisors, consultants, pretty much every way you can cut a relationship that existed at some form or another. And it was never really the beauty of that sort of open source process is it's not like, hey, here's design criteria and like it's it's got to be done and then it's got to go to contracting and now you've got your no, it was a hey, here's like a set of ideas that a bunch of very smart folks like thought could help solve some of nuclear's problems. And the one great thing about the Open 100 is everyone loves to criticize online. And that was the best part. That was really the intent, right? Is we wanted industry veterans, regulators, couch potatoes, and everyone in between to say, hey, that doesn't make sense. Or like, hey, you get some guy that's like, hey, I worked on 7 power plants. You have to access that valve. Like, you don't understand. You gotta maintain that thing every day. Otherwise it's going to leak everywhere. Right.
Yeah.
And so this is frankly a tactic that I use even in commercial negotiation or sales and discovery is you suggest something that is like very wrong and someone wants to correct you. And they'll give you more information because they're correcting you and they feel like they're in a position of strength and superiority. And you get just fantastic information when you present it that way. And that was the goal. I think, even today, and I think this is a big difference from what I've observed from the nuclear industry more broadly. Like the nuclear industry has a learning problem. Like they want to show up in all their spaces. They want to be the expert. There's this culture that they have to have all the answers. If you don't have all the answers, then you can't be. And so then they fake it.
Yeah, like you're engineers, right? You're supposed to be able to know this stuff. Like,
yeah,
why
it's not going to last for 70 years. Like, how do you know? Like, we got to. Yeah, it's this like totally ridiculous expectation and the opposite of building a good company and a good product, right? A good company and a good product is at its core a learning organization, right? What's the Amazon thing is day one, right? Like we go into every sales conversation, every regulatory conversation, every commercial negotiation. Hey, what's the counterparty trying to do here? What are they trying to solve? What are they scared about? And how can we find a way to work together to address those things? Not, hey, we know the answer. Hey, we need you to do this. Because that just doesn't work. It's not how people operate.
I love that you highlighted that. One of the questions we had was how has podcasting helped your efforts? Because you guys have the Titans of Nuclear podcast, the Energy Impact podcast, but I've seen that in my career, right? Like that's why you have conferences and consortium and friends that are willing to talk to you and help you solve problems and like address stuff together because it's a way of getting more information, just like you say, learning, right? Stepping through this learning curve. And I think problem that I've seen with the industry is like trying to learn or optimize some of the problems too early or optimizing the wrong problems. And rather, if you try and build fast and fail fast and gather as much information from other people in the space as you can, then yeah, you can learn faster. So
yeah. Yeah, and I think, it's a lot that helped us. I think it was really fun to highlight some of the people in the space, right? Like it's one of the highlights or the joys in my life is getting to talk to people that have done really cool things and maybe no one's ever asked about or talk, outside of maybe their
Yeah.
close-knit community. So, yeah, it's been really fun to meet those people and then to share with those people. And for us, we learned a ton along the way and have built additional relationships, right? Have built advisor relationships or consultant relationships or supplier relationships. So it's really been a fun platform. And I know you're kind of on your own journey as well. So excited to see where you take it.
Awesome, man. Well, give us a 30-second description of what you guys are trying to do. What is this nuclear power plant that
Yeah.
you're selling, and the business model that you've adopted
Yeah.
to do so?
So Last Energy is a builder, owner, operator of a micronuclear 20 megawatt power plant product. We are combining the what we view as the best of three different worlds. That's your pressurized water reactor nuclear technology. We have no energy generating technology under the planet, like on the planet and throughout all of history, that is as energy dense, as sustainable, right? The fewest materials in for the most materials out. And that exists and is broadly available today, right? Like uranium exists everywhere. And so from a technology perspective, we've got, 70 years now of operating history. Like that is the premier energy generating source on planet Earth. And then we try to steal the best things from two other industries. The second is modular manufacturing and assembly of the entire power plant. So every reactor in some form of fashion is modular, right? I mean, like a pressure vessel.
Yeah.
But that doesn't actually solve the construction challenges. The challenges haven't been reactor. I think Hinkley Point C just started on their reactor, 8 years after starting construction, right? Now, the problem is one both of scale and of modularity, of true modular construction. And what are the industries that have done that really, really, really well, right? Well, it's data centers and the oil and gas space, right? You're able to put oil and at different scales. So your oil and gas modules can be enormous, right? Offshore platforms. But if you think about gas skids, you think about processing plants, right? Like they're in the middle of nowhere, West Texas or Panhandle, Oklahoma. Like you got to be able to get the equipment there and get it set up and moving. It's got to be fast and it's got to work, right?
Yeah.
Data center space, same thing. Like, someone, I don't know how serious this comment was. Someone was like, it's $1 million a minute if a data center is down. And now that they're bigger, it's probably more. Like, it's got to get there. It's got to be online. It's got to work. And it's got to happen fast. And there's a couple data center providers in particular that are very good at, hey, here's our module. If you want more compute, we'll just give you more modules. And so that's the second leg of the stool. And the third is the developer-led business model. I'll get on my soapbox a little bit. I just can't stand the nuclear entitlement. Hey, I want to sell a utility a reactor for $4 billion and they're going to do all the work. Like that hasn't been the way energy projects have been developed for 30 years. I did a speech on this at a nuclear conference in the Netherlands. And in doing that, realized that was before video streaming. Netflix existed a couple years after energy markets liberalized. Think about that. Like the last time the business model that most of the nuclear industry talks about existed was when you could still go to Blockbuster. It just we
like years before Blockbuster went bankrupt, right?
Yeah, yeah. We have to move. You have to move on, and it doesn't actually matter if you think that's a better model because tough shit. That's just not what it is. And so we have to stop pretending that the government's going to swoop in and solve all of our problems, and utilities are going to be forced to do it because it's such a great source. No, we have to take real responsibility as an industry to develop and build out projects. That was true for LNG, it's true for solar, it's true for batteries, it's true for hydrogen, right? It's true for everything. And the beauty of that is that skill set exists in spades, right? That is a real estate development skill set.
Right.
And so if you look at our team, I can't find that skill set in the nuclear space because no one's done it. But we have biomass experience. I've got gas and LNG experience. We've got distributed solar experience. We've got energy from waste experience, right? So it's all these folks that have seen similar processes, and the paperwork's pretty similar. Maybe it goes to a different acronym, right? It goes to a different body. But there's only so many ways you can look at a site, right? There's only so many species you can examine or weather patterns that you can evaluate. And the beauty of nuclear is actually most of those things are somewhat irrelevant, right? Because it can be so self-contained. And so really those three aspects, if you step back on a purely first principles basis, you're like, hey, we got this fantastic energy source. We've got these proven construction methodologies that people are already really good at doing. And then we've got this business model that, I think it's almost in the trillions of, dollars a year globally that go into, right? From 500 billion 5 years ago. Like, hey, wait a minute. Like, this is starting to look pretty darn good, right? And so we sell energy to people that need energy. And we, bring accretive investment opportunities for people that invest in infrastructure projects. It doesn't have to be much more complicated than that. And then obviously, if you dig in, the underlying contracting structures become really critical, right? How you allocate risk, who's doing what work. That's where the magic really happens. And that's true regardless of the generating source, right? You have to have good contracts in order to make that all work.
Yeah. I want to touch on this point or comment on it a little bit because it is so relevant and nascent. That when I was doing my own work and researching the space, I kept looking into the industry and being like, where are the companies, right? Like, because I come from the oil and gas industry and they're operators and they're like out there doing stuff, building projects, like actually putting steel in the ground and like acting as the general contractor, right? That is the company, an oil company, right? And that didn't, like you say, exist in the nuclear industry. It's not, there weren't quote unquote nuclear companies. There were
Right.
widget designers that were building reactors and then they'd just try and sell those to utilities. And like that
Yeah.
business model it's hard. It's a really hard business model because you don't have control over a lot of it, right?
Yes.
And so I really admire that you guys have adopted that. I mean, it's you, it's Oklo, it's Allo, right? Like that are stepping up to say, hey, let's go and fill that unmet need and have some ownership in this. So
yeah, it's that alignment of accountability, right? I think you can see in some of the other public filings and there's different things out there where for some of these companies, the consulting contracts is actually where most of the value is, right? And particularly the incumbents, you get a government, you get a utility on the hook, and once someone gives you 50 million, oh, it's just another 10 more to do this, another 20 more to do this, right? The
which
incentive,
isn't actually creating value for the world.
no value. Yeah, great. Like just
like we're not creating electricity with those contracts.
Turning paperwork around, right? And escalating costs and doing more design work, right? It is literally infinite. So you can be you have to manage those people, right? And it's true outside of the space, right? Like,
I've had that in oil and gas. I've managed EPC firms that, they send the first proposal and they're like, all right, it's going to be $1 million to design this facility. And I'm like, that's cool. My budget's like 25,000. So we're going to scale it back a little bit.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to hit.
Yep. So, and we don't need perfect, right? I need good enough. I need, and so, I think that it can only be done in this model. Like even with government support and government can help fill gaps the same way they're doing with other nascent technologies, but it has to be led by the industry and all about creating value for customers, right? If you lose that part of it, then you've gone too far off, right? It won't be successful if that's not the prime focus.
You guys have announced lots of deals, or you can find some headlines and articles that say like billions of dollars of deals and projects. How are those going? And then also, I mean, Brett's been interviewed and says, he gets excited about other people stepping into the space and not necessarily copying exactly what you guys are doing, but emulating and replicating. And I'll just say, like, my opinion is that's going to be so helpful for the industry if more people get in and fill this developer role. And I feel like a lot of people within the industry don't see this. They say, well, but then they're competing. We're competing for who we're going to be selling energy to. And it's like, no, you're not competing with each other. You're competing with other power producing companies. And if there are other people stepping into the space, then that makes everything else that you need to build your product even cheaper. So, that was a comment more than a question.
No. But actually, two really good themes. So I'll do it in order. I'll talk about our contracting strategy and status and pipeline, and then I'll talk a little bit about that idea of competition and how I think about it. On the generally our PPAs are 15 to 25 years, and so when you look at and our average I actually have to look at this again, given some of the recent traction, but like generally our average is 4.5 units per project. So, some are 8, 9, 10 units, and those will scale in over time. Others are onesies and twosies. But if you take that as a baseload energy product over, 15 or 25 years, you're generating like pretty enormous streams of revenue. Now, there's a lot of hands at the cookie jar that, as that walks down the depository agreement, of course. But yeah, I mean, the beauty of the energy space is it's just so damn big. And the other beauty, and this actually plays right into the competition story, is we've never actually transitioned an energy source.
Yeah.
Right? We've never transitioned. We've only
kept burning wood and coal.
Still burning wood. We're still burning coal. We're still doing manual labor, right? Like we've only layered additional energy on top of it. And yeah, I think, look, everyone loves the AI story. I think there's like reshoring of manufacturing, and there's electrification. Like the human condition is fundamentally a fight against entropy, and like our ability to win is arming us with the ability to manipulate energy. And the more we manipulate and manage energy, the better we'll be. And still a couple billion on the planet that don't have access to energy. So I think it just underscores like humans, like our problem with large numbers, right? Like our biases, again, like our difficulty wrestling with large numbers is that like the market is so big, like there is room for multiple $100 billion companies just to like
at the
get
current
halfway
size
there.
of the market.
Yeah, right? like it's so big, and there's so many applications, and like we can't be all things to all people. It's a 20 megawatt unit. We can do as many as you want, but if you need like a gigawatt that turns on immediately, like yeah, we can't. Like I'm not going to do that. It's not a good fit for me. Or if you need like 1 megawatt, like there's guys out there solving that. I can't. That's too hard for me. And that's our sales process, right? Is like a discover, like can we add value to this customer? And sometimes they think you can, sometimes they think you can't. Sometimes they're right. That's okay. Again, it's just such a big space.
Yeah.
That there's so much room for lots of different participants and business models. And I fundamentally believe competition makes everyone better, right? Like if you think about the sports analogy, like the nuclear industry, they come to the practice field and they're really nice and they're hugging everybody and they don't do a lot of work. And then they walk off, and then each position group says how lazy the other one is or how crummy the other, right? And like off the field, really sharp elbows. And then they get to the game and we're getting our ass kicked, right? We got 40 losing seasons. And then we're just like so happy that our culture is so good, right? Like that is like what I like. That's the nuclear industry. And that's not it though. Like the way you get better, the reason why solar has gotten so good and so fast is because it is so competitive, and like people will lose, people will go bankrupt, and some people will win, and they'll be enormous, and that talent will take those lessons, right? Back to learning, the talent will take those lessons, they'll go on to the next one, and it creates this just like unstoppable momentum of new ideas, even in the light of a bunch of failures. So like I think I saw a stat the other day, 635 solar projects got canceled last year in the US.
Yeah.
But no one cares because 1,500 got started, right? Because there's 100 companies with like, doing this rooftop niche or this distributed thing or this utility, right? Like everyone's got an angle. And so I hate how short-sighted and how fixed pie the nuclear industry really is. And I think there's some reasons for that, some logical and like some rational and some a little bit more like nefarious. But broadly, if we want to be successful, it has to be a market where we let the results on the field dictate what is a win or what isn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, yeah, I don't know, I'll leave it there. I can go on this.
I like it. So who's your typical customer? Where are you finding these people, or what's your archetype of an optimal end user look like?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, obviously the data center space has become a really, really hot one. It's a space that we've been involved in, and, frankly, since I got here, even way back 2-3 years ago, before some of the AI boom stuff, like data centers were good customers because they had been buying corporate power for a decade. And so they were and they are a base load consumer of energy. And then you add the environmental sort of targets on top of it. So they were a really logical customer set. I would say over the last 12 months, that has just sort of like gone into super duper overdrive.
Maybe hyperscale.
Yeah. Pun in as hyperdrive. As I like it. Um, and I think some of that is real. I think some of that is a nature of that competition, right? Everyone's kind of vying for the same end customers. But yeah, it's probably about half of our book at this point, to be honest with you. And certainly some of our earlier, like our most mature, the first few projects are likely to be data centers. And then there's this sort of I'll call it mid-scale manufacturing. So yeah, think of any type of industry that might be large enough for their own gas CHP unit, or their own like set of gas peakers.
CHP,
So
combined heat and power. Right?
combined heat and power. Yeah, thank you. I'm still bad at using
all
acronyms
good.
sometimes. So pulp and paper. We have some food manufacturing, some petrochemical, metals and mining. Some of those will take heat as well. Some of them are just purely electric, or some are electrifying, right? Maybe their electric need has been pretty low, but they're adding an arc furnace. Some of those are really big. Some of those are less real too. Like we'll see.
Any behind the meter EV charging stations? I feel like you guys' plan would be optimal.
EV charging is hard. So we like having
Consistent.
We need a couple of things to really make it work. We need a customer that has a baseload power need, right? And or is willing to pay for availability. So we don't need someone, and I can talk a little more about that in a second if you're interested. And then we need a counterparty that has credit, or can buy credit in order to backstop their obligation to pay us. Right? You think about the deal. Our investors are bringing in $100 million up front, and then their return on and of that capital comes over 15 to 25 years. And so the counterparty has to be able to say, yes, I'm going to be around to pay you for that period of time. Now, there's a whole host of ways to structure that and address that and sort of allocate costs of that credit. And that's my bailiwick and history from a decade of being on the investor side, needing that credit to make it work. But it's with EV charging in particular, they tend to be much less mature, immediate counterparties, developers, and then they don't have tenants that have credit either. Right, especially if it's a public charging station, you can't like syndicate credit amongst anybody that will use it.
It's not like we can guarantee that people are going to show up to our EV charging station next 20 years and be plugging in.
And so early we said, okay, well, one of the things we did look at is, okay, what about a captive charging station? Is there a like a FedEx or a UPS? Is there a return to base process that could make a lot of sense? And generally, we're a bit big for that. Like 20 megawatts would be some like serious fleet trucking, and that's generally not return to base, right? That's generally more intermodal. And so I think there's some unique aspects for some of these like mobile generator or mobile reactor type concepts that are smaller, maybe that they have like better ramping capabilities. Because again, then it's overnight. And so it's all on, it's all off.
Right.
Again, there's ways to address that and spill to grid, but so you start kind of going through this process. It's getting really, really complex. And we said, you know what, that like we got enough to worry about. If I can site next to a data center, I could build 5 or 6 or 7 units and just sell power and, focus on the other stuff. So that's where we ended up on the EV charging side.
Gotcha. Circling back to learning, how different is your guys' current design from the Open 100 project? And then you guys have built some stuff, like you've got your cube demonstration, you've got multiple demonstration prototype, full scale prototype reactor vessels and steam generator. Like, how has building those and doing those physical projects actually taught you stuff about how you're going to go and build the real plants?
Yeah, I don't know if we have another few hours, but we could play them. So I would say
the big questions. I'm curious. I want to know.
I wowould say very different from the Open 100, right? I mean, that was 2018, 2019, whatever, maybe 2020. I think it was 100 megawatt maybe. So the product has come an incredibly long way from that original set of ideas. And, I think even it was confusing to some customers who've taken some of the like more material docs down. But yeah, so the product itself has definitely gone through a number of iterations now and has become quite defined. And a large part of that were these couple of different prototype processes. So there's like two like main things that you learn when you actually build stuff. The first is like just the technical side of it. So like for instance, we had a specific structural steel design for our first prototype. And we did it because it was like a little bit cheaper than an alternative that we were considering. And then we went to fabricate it. We realized it created a lot more managerial headaches to ensure that the orientation was correct. And we said, well, we can't have that. Like, how stupid would it be to like bring all of these modules to site and have one of the connectors like have the wrong orientation? Like it's not IKEA. And so
that stuff happens, man. You got to screw stuff together.
You got to screw it up, and you got to like really, you got to really test it. And I also will actually, this is a good way to plug as well. It can feel a little dorky. We do a ton of both 3D modeling and then 3D printing, and then like very small, like what seems like kind of silly experiments, like desktop level experiments. But you have to like kind of play with stuff, and so many ideas come out of really visualizing something. It looks different than it did on the screen, right? Like it's got a different consistency. Oh, that elbow looks really tight, right? Like you just have to go through that process in order to come out with a good product. And even still, maybe the other thing that I'll step back and say, we're not building our own manufacturing facility until we build a few, like we are.
Why would you? There's already existing manufacturing facilities.
That and guess what? They do a lot more than we would, right? Like let the people that are like do the thing they're really good at. This is for us to learn to manage other people, not to actually do it. And that's the second leg that's so important: contract management, contract structuring, owner's engineer oversight. Right? How do we get people on site? So the first two we did were in Texas. That's pretty straightforward. We had the same jokes. You talk about the same football teams. Well, the third we did in Poland. And so now you got the time, flew folks out there and they stayed out there for, it took about 5 weeks to put that module together, but the team was just fantastic. The thing about, I think it's like some Eastern European, like culturally are just so technically oriented and they were, hey, what if we use this jig? They knew we were like looking to do more with them, and we love working with them. Like, what if we use this jig, or hey, have you thought about structuring it this way? They did this like laser etched plate to show how excited they were. It was just a really great experience, and part of that was we were more prepared going in because we'd done it twice, right? So we knew we had to give, hey, here's where you got to give more direction. Here's where you can like take their input, make them feel a part of the process. Like they're the experts, we aren't. We know what the output needs to look like, but hey, how can we make them our partners in this and not some confrontational type relationship? And so, it's like those would be the two main themes, I guess. And you have to just keep iterating as an organization and get better at stuff like accounts payable, right? Like, got to make sure you got to meet the contract, right? It sounds so silly.
It's so boring. It's so boring. And yet it's so necessary. It's what makes a good business.
Yeah. You got to do it. Yeah. So we've definitely grown, definitely become more institutional. We've got more growth to do. And I hope we always have that mentality, right? And you're always growing, you're always getting better. And it's always day one.
Nice. You mentioned Poland, right? You guys have some projects in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, but not in the United States. Why not the U.S.? And then, do you think that'll change with some of the Advance Act? I'll say legislation that's come out, and I've got more follow-up questions to that. But let's start.
Yeah, let me start there and then dive in. Don't let me just word vomit at you. I think definitely like. We'd love to build in the U.S. It's always, what's the, would you want it in your backyard? Like unequivocally, yes, like absolutely. Like I'd love nothing more than to have this here domestically. When we think about it from a business perspective, there are a couple key challenges for us. The first was the economics. That here in the U.S. we have access to really cheap gas. There's no real carbon tax, so any environmental premium is voluntary. And then our tariff structure is generally regressive, meaning if you're a large energy consumer, so these would be our customers, you pay less on your transmission and delivered cost of energy versus more. So that's really hard for us. So you got cheap power, and a lot can be solved with tax credits, but again, huge complexity. Right, tax credits aren't like a panacea.
It's not
Like
straightforward. It's not like, oh yeah, we've got a tax credit, and then the government just sends us money. You have to have like a tax obligation, right?
You
That
have to
is
have the
of
tax
scale.
obligations. Now you're managing all of these interim structures, right? You have deficit restoration obligations, and then you have to make sure you've got the right content, right? You've got, even in the IRA, a lot of guidance still outstanding around how you think about the broader claims of what the IRA defines. So I just couldn't add that risk to our initial deployments, right? Like my team has to focus on what it can control and how it can execute. And if you add that like structural complexity, and tax equity is super risk off, right? Like no one's going to do tax equity at like a first deal, just too hard. So from an economic and sort of structural perspective, didn't make sense. Now in Europe, competing, and it wasn't always Europe. Europe really solidified around the gas crisis driven by the Russian war and the intermittency challenges 6 months prior. So UK costs actually escalated 6 months prior to the Russian invasion. I think, you could put your tinfoil hat on. There was probably some correlation, right? There was some weakness that Putin recognized, right? It's not been a secret in Eastern Europe. People were worried about their exposure to that gas. And so, yeah, they're a global LNG priced market. They have carbon taxes that are escalating. They've got old generation that's retiring. They've got a bunch of intermittent generation that's causing price volatility. And then they pass on that intermittent cost to the end user. And so now I can charge double what I would here in the States and still save my customer 30 to 40%. And so that is that sort of win-win that like now I have a unit economics that I can go and do all of these other things that I've talked about doing, right? Versus playing with a really thin margin, everything having to go right. And then the other aspect of it is the regulatory process as a new entrant just has a very poor track record here.
It's a high barrier to entry. Yeah.
Yeah, particularly for a new entrant, like it just is too hard, and you're competing against folks that don't really want you there, right? Like it is competitive, and it's an industry with really sharp elbows. And so, yeah, I think I would say more broadly, regulators get a lot of shit in the industry, and the more we've been involved with regulators and the more we engage, like with broader industry, I side with the regulators more than I do industry. I think like submissions have generally been poor. I think there's like not real projects, right? In Europe in particular, in Eastern Europe, generally they're like government projects crammed down whichever like state-owned entity is there. And, they've spent $500 million and haven't really gotten anything yet, right? So it's like, I think the regulators are generally well-intentioned and very naturally highly skeptical of anybody in the space because it's been so poorly executed on. And so eventually that turns usually to our advantage as we mature in these relationships because we read all those documents, right? We put it in their local language, right? Like who cares about US code if I'm submitting something to someone in Romania? It's Romanian code that's got to match. And so that actually has really helped us and, continues to drive, our confidence in the ability to execute in these markets.
Nice.
And the final thing I will say, if you think about that framework, right, it's not really the regulator's fault. And I think that's really true in the US too, in some respects, that like it's the law as written. It's shitty that it's written that way, right? Like it makes it impossible to build anything, but that's where that Advance Act, bipartisan support, right? Like nuclear's always had incredibly high support here in the States. So like, yeah, I think there's a lot of momentum. And I think the biggest risk is can we as an industry be constructive with those tailwinds, right? Because no one's going to come in and say, hey, here's the right framework, but the industry. And so if we can align on, hey, here is what needs to happen. Here's how the EPA does it. Here's how we can create the framework to accommodate for benefits, right, versus risk. Or here's how we can make here's the size cutoff. Everything below that has a lighter, this is other research reactors are this size, like that should be the process. Like the industry has to dictate that because the government can't. They don't know.
I thought, reading through it and listening to the webinar, I thought you guys would have been a good fit for the Gen 3 plus light water reactor process that the DOE has put out recently. Notwithstanding, I think they have to have a utility be prime on that agreement, and it doesn't really fit with your model. But I don't know.
That was a weird clause, right? Like that was weird. Like why define that way? I think it's a little. Again, it comes back to like
I guess maybe this is too much inside baseball too, right? This was a grant that, giving listeners a bit of perspective if they don't know, right? This was a grant process that's just started in summer of 2024 that the Department of Energy has released to put about $800 million towards a light water reactor project, right? And it's a little ambiguous about what exactly that could go to, but yeah. And reading it, I was like, these last energy should apply and like go use it to go through the licensing process.
I know. Look, we'll see. I never say never. We continue to monitor how stuff's moving forward. Like we continue to spend a little bit of time, like keeping an eye on it, like involvement here. So yeah, maybe look, the window hasn't closed, right? So we'll see. There's a lot we have to focus on execution wise in our existing projects. And so, that's part of the trade-off here. And I would say philosophically, what you just said, like, is an argument. Hey, use that money and go through the licensing process. But we keep doing that. That doesn't solve the underlying problem, and it's not scalable. So it just actually reinforces the problem. If I get $400 million from government to go through a licensing process that costs 4 times the cost of my entire power plant. Okay.
What are we doing here? Right?
What are we doing? What's the next one? Like, let's say you cut it in half, right? You're making my permitting $200 million and my power plant $100. Like that is crazy. Unless I don't sell electricity. If I don't sell electricity, then it's maybe 10, right? Like okay, well, what? Like that's the kind of stuff we need to address. The underlying fundamental problems with the policy, right? That to be fair, NRC is just enforcing the law, right? And they'll tell you that. Sometimes that's genuine and sometimes it isn't, but like they want to like do stuff too, right? They just don't want to have these sort of like half-ass applications because no one cares because, the US government's on the hook and everyone knows it's their own tax dollars that are going to this project that, has no chance of seeing the light of day. So I don't know. I've a little bit too onerous on some of those things. We can talk about some of my perspectives on the broader space because I think things like sometimes I'm too negative.
How are capital markets viewing nuclear as an opportunity?
Yeah, thank you. You pulled me off my. That's good.
Yeah.
Look, really excited.
Bad job as a host here, letting you get
too down. It's good. The capital market space has never been more interested in me, and you don't have to take my word for it. We now have 3 public comps that are going like absolutely gangbusters. Fusion's raised God knows amounts of money, and even Fission has raised a ton of private money over the last 3-4 years. So, you still see people in the space say, "Oh, private capital markets can never do nuclear," and I would say absolutely bullshit. Like anyone peddling that message is probably, if they aren't in the exact same breath, the next breath asking for money from government, right? And so, it's helpful to your case to say private markets can't do it, but guess what? They have and are run Oakload, Nano, NewScale, obviously, and then a host of private fundraisers, some of which are public and some of which are private, right? Like there is a ton of activity in this space. What we need now are real projects. Right. And so that's where our focus on maturing those offtake agreements, land agreements, grid connection agreements, right? Like we're right on the cusp of being able to bring some of these to capital markets and figuring out really the hard part, which is that early deployment capital, right? This is not a nuclear thing. This is an industry thing. And there's a lot of different ways that the industry is thinking about it and that capital markets are trying to solve it.
Early deployment capital, that's like the seed funding of the money up front to go and originate the project, build the first ones. Am I thinking about that correctly?
Yeah. And generally you can think about a project life cycle similar to a company life cycle, right? Where you like, if you have a good marketplace, you structure it such that lots of projects can start with very little money invested. And then as you get more mature, it's a little bit more money. And then, right. And you go from seed to series A to B, right. And it's bigger checks. but it's less risk. It's maybe less upside. And so, development capital and then project capital are sort of your traditional baskets. Now we're taking a little bit of an adjusted view to that because our model allows us to almost treat the product, the power plant can exist anywhere in 3D space and still produce electricity at the low end of the voltage. And so that allows us in our markets, they're all 50 hertz, thankfully, to place that product anywhere in those markets. And so we're able to manufacture ahead of what would be a traditional single project FID. But that is corporate. It is likely corporate capital or some form of structured capital at the topco level that will support that funding.
Gotcha. Yeah. Michael, we're coming up on our time. I knew this was going to happen, that we wouldn't have enough time to go over all the things that I wanted to chat about. So.
My fault. You let me rattle on.
I know. I've got a strong sense of ownership. So as the host, it's my responsibility to keep you on track, right? So a couple just last questions as we wrap up. Is climate change still our greatest challenge, or is kind of this idea of energy prosperity, energy abundance? And Brett always talked about on his early episodes, like he got into it with climate change. And then I think there was one episode that he's like, actually, I think energy poverty might be more important.
I think he's definitely taken a bit of a shift. I would lean on balance to like an energy abundance question, just philosophically, right? Going back to my earlier comment, that's the fight against entropy. Yeah. And our ability to have more energy will help us adapt to whatever climate throws at us now or in the future. So I think the answer is how much energy can we generate and as sustainably as possible.
I love that. That was a very diplomatic and positive answer. Well done, sir. Last question for you, Michael. Leave us with your most optimistic, positive view of the future. I normally ask people, what's it going to look like in 10 to 20 years? But I think you guys are on a faster time scale than that. So,
yeah, I mean, look, in 10 to 20 years, we need to get this industry to a place where it is an industry. It is a market. It is a set of like bright, smart, young people finding new solutions and, pushing me out to early retirement because I'm too curmudgeon and I'm doing it the way we did it in 2025, right? Like, we only get there by creating that learning environment and creating a marketplace that like invites competitors and new ideas and different peers. And so, that's where we need to head. If we head there, we can do it. This is not hard if we put our minds to it. But we need to allow that space to let that flourish.
I love that. Michael Crabb, thanks so much for your time.
Mark, thanks for having me.